Well, hi everybody, and welcome to another My Favourite Ipswich Town 11. I'm Mike Bacon, and I think you're enjoying this feature. From what we can gather, people seem to be enjoying listening along to some of our fans and celebrity fans. Some of them, celebrities, a small C for some of them, and a bigger C for others. But I mean, that's a different world. I'll let you guess what this guy is. But anyway, no. So we've got celebrity fans, we've got fans chatting away. We've got lots going on throughout the summer with this feature, and I know a lot of you enjoying it. Remember, it's your favourite 11, not your best 11. I had to kickstart this feature, and of course, got completely pilloried for my favourite 11 for not putting in Kevin Beattie. But I mean, that's favourite, not best. So anyway, but look, our friend today who joined us on the Kings of Anglia, this Kings of Anglia podcast, is a man who we all know. We certainly know his voice, even if we don't know his face. Some people say it's better to know his voice than his face, but it's probably being a bit unfair. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him a long time. We've known him a long time. Of course, BBC Radio Suffolk's where he made his mark for many, many years, but he's the voice of Portman Road PA system these days as well. A big town fan. It's Stephen Foster. Steve, I can't call you Steve. That's a silly name. Foz is your name. Foz, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. How are you, Mike?
Well, thank you very much for. I'm very well, thank you, and I'm well. It's nice to speak to you on this wonderful morning. Now, Foz. Now, how did you get your sort of nickname, Foz?
Foz, I picked that up as a nickname when I worked in the newsroom at Radio Orwell. And I was actually called Fozzie by John Cranston, who joined on the same day as I did. And he decided that he would be calling me Foz or Fozzie from there onwards. So I shortened it to Foz. And then a lot of people knew me off air as Foz. But then my editor at Radio Suffolk, Gerald Main, suggested that Foz would be a good sort of handle on air as well. So it sort of took off from there, really. And most people call me Foz now and not Stephen. I don't really mind. And just going back to an earlier point, Mike, it's a celebrity with a very small C. In fact, you can hardly see it.
Oh, you're too modest. You're too modest, Foz. I know. It's like having Foz with a small F. You can't do it. It's just not right. Well, look, Foz, this is about your favourite Ipswich Town 11, of course. And now, look, very quickly before we get into it, because we're looking forward to what your favourite 11 is. So, Ipswich Town Football Club. When did you first start supporting them and going to see them?
Well, the first game I went to was back in January 1969. I remember it very well indeed. My dad took me along. We stood in the chicken run, as it was called, the Cobbold stand it is these days, but in those days it was the chicken run. I was absolutely football mad. I played for the primary school team and was desperate to get to Portman Road, and I've been badgering my dad for ages to take me, and he did. It was a game against Burnley, which Town won by 2-0. And I remember that Mick Mills and Ray Crawford got the goals. And it was that in-between period of Bill McGarry and Bobby Robson. Cyril Lee, I think that was his last match in caretaker charge before Bobby Robson arrived a few days later. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Beautifully put. The rest, as you say, is right, Foz, is history. I mean, and what wonderful history it's been, Foz. I mean, you know, you're like me. You've seen all the good times, the wonderful times, and we talk a lot about that on this podcast. I know perhaps we have a lot of younger listeners who don't remember the Robson days particularly. I mean, it's coming full circle. Do you hope it's coming full circle now, Foz? I mean, you're at Portman Road every week doing the PA. Are you liking what you're seeing at the moment?
I'm liking it very much indeed. I love the fact that the ball is mainly on the deck. There were times during certain other eras, Mick McCarthy being one, where we played a lot of really high balls, punting it upfield. I don't like that style of football at all. And I remember a few years ago when I was sitting in the director's box alongside Franz Tyson and Arnold Muren. There's my first bit of name dropping for you. Yeah. And they both commented to me that they couldn't believe how much the ball was in the air and not on the ground. And that was a style of play that obviously McCarthy enjoyed or certainly thought was going to bring success. Sadly, it didn't. But I think Kieran McKenna's style of zippy football on the deck is really up my street. And I think next season's going to be the big one for Town. I really do.
Excellent. That's great. That's great to hear, Foz. Like you say, you're like me. You've seen it all through the different eras, and there's no doubt football on the grass, as they say, is far more attractive to watch. And let the players be footballers. You know, that's what their game is. So yeah, very much. So you're on the PA at the moment, Foz. Enjoy that.
I enjoy that very much indeed. I'm well aware that a lot of people in the stadium haven't been able to hear me because of all sorts of technical problems. It's an infrastructure thing. I mean, the PA has been up and running with the speakers for a long time now, probably well over 20 years when the new speakers were put in. So it's time for an upgrade, and that's what's happening this summer. And hopefully everybody in the ground can hear me loudly and clearly in the new season, because it is frustrating. We've got a lot of information to get over and good halftime interviews and stuff, some great guests. And a lot of people say to me, when I get the bus home, Foz, we can't hear you. We can hear you in the toilets, but we can't hear you, in the ground itself. So hopefully that'll be put right, and we can start afresh in well, I was going to say August, but it's July, isn't it? End of July.
It's the end of July this season. It's fine. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, that's fantastic. I mean, a quick word before we get into your 11, then, Foz, a quick word about what you're up to today, because obviously you left Radio Suffolk now. You're doing a bit of, I see, because obviously we go to Speedway together. So we like a little bit of our Speedway, and Foz Media sponsors a heat. I think it must be Heat 6, or do they change it each week? I don't know. But Foz Media, what is that?
That's my sort of freelance little business I've got. So I do various radio programs and voiceovers, and also events. Anyone that wants a man speaking to a microphone clearly, I'm your man.
Perfect. Well, absolutely wonderful. Even in the toilets at Portman Road, you're heard. I mean, what a thought. Anyway, Foz, look, lovely to chat to you. Let's crack on. You've obviously seen Ipswich Town for many years, so you've got a plethora of decades to cast your favourite players over. Have you got a little bit of a formation, or are you just going for it with like 10 attackers, or what are you doing?
Well, no, I've gone for a formation really, and the old style. I think it looks more like a 4-2-4 actually. So yeah, I'm really going for it. But I love my attacking players, as you'll find out later. But we'll start with the goalkeeper, shall we? And quite a few to choose from, obviously. I didn't go for Fred Barber, although I did enjoy his one appearance cameo, mask and all. But he was one of the great characters between the sticks for Town, obviously. But I've gone for the Canadian international Craig Forrest, who, for me, was one of the great ambassadors for the club when he was here, and a damn fine goalkeeper as well. I was really impressed with Craig Forrest, and he seemed to sort of exude confidence around the defence, which for me is what it's all about with the goalkeeper. The defence has got to feel, they're in safe hands. And for me, Craig Forrest was a very safe pair of hands. And as I say, a great ambassador for the club. He also had a great choice of music. He was a big fan of lots of music, and often used to go to gigs with us at the UEA in Norwich. A friend of mine, you might know him actually, Stan, put coach trips together, and Craig Forrest and Frank Yallop, who were best pals obviously at that time, used to join us on the coach trips. The coach was full of nurses, I hasten to add, because one of our colleagues was a tutor at the local college, so plenty of nurses on the bus. We did get to the gigs as well, you'll be pleased to hear. Craig Forrest came to one, I remember, because I had a chat with him about the band, the Georgia Satellites. And for those people that used to listen to me on the Headbangers Ball, you remember how much I loved the Georgia Satellites. And Craig was a big fan, and I think he tagged Frank along, actually. I'm not sure Frank knew who the Georgia Satellites were, but Craig Forrest most certainly did. And we had a good evening at the UEA in Norwich. I mean, football-wise, for me, Craig Forrest, integral part, obviously, of the team, John Lyle's side that won the old First Division, as it was, or old Second Division, to get to the inaugural Premier League. And I went to virtually every game that season, home and away. And Craig Forrest was a tower of strength at the back. And the only sour bit for Craig Forrest probably was the 9-0 drubbing at Manchester United. And he wasn't responsible for any of the goals either. And then he went back, I think, when he joined West Ham a few years later. And I think I'm right in saying they were beaten 8-0. So poor old Craig. Old Trafford was not a happy hunting ground for him. But, apart from the 9-0, and he got sent off in one game, I seem to remember, at Portman Road, which was quite a sight. You didn't often see a goalkeeper get sent off. And that gave Clive Baker his chance to get a run in the team as well. But Craig bounced back from that and played a huge part, not only in Town's promotion that season under the wonderful John Lyle, but that first season back in the top flight was a remarkable season, wasn't it? And Craig played his part, and hence in the end he got a big move to West Ham.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on for us. I loved Craig Forrest. I thought he was an excellent goalkeeper, and did an interview with him. Actually, there's an interview with him on our Kings of England podcast here, which I did only a few months ago. Really, chat about different things. And funny enough, going back to that Man United game, we talked about that, which he's happy to talk about. Believe it or not, he said to me, I remember him. He said actually this podcast, Mike. The thing about it was, he said, "You're not going to believe this. I thought it was 10." So he actually came off the pitch thinking it was 10. So he said it was actually a little bit of a relief when I got back in and found it was only 9. Anyway, but that's
well, I got back into Ipswich obviously that night. I went to the game and we had to laugh at the end. We otherwise we'd be crying, and we drowned our sorrows with a few beers on the way back to Ipswich. The following morning, I don't know whether you remember this, John McCreerick, the racing commentator and personality, sadly no longer with us, was opening a betting shop in Ipswich, and of course had plenty to say about Town's drubbing at Manchester United. And I interviewed John the following morning. That was great fun, as you'd expect.
He was a character, wasn't he, John McCreerick?
He certainly was.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so there we go. Well, look, Craig Forrest in goal between the sticks then, Foz. Let's start with you. Let's go through your defence. We can go right back at centre halves and left back. If you want to start with the right back, it's entirely up to you.
Well, I'll start with the right back, and it's a man who actually possibly played more games as a left back in the old days, but I seem to recall he started off as a right back. Mick Mills, an absolute club legend, and he was in the Town team and indeed scored a goal when I was at that game against Burnley in January 1969. And for me, a model professional, both as a player and then as a manager. His managerial career had its moments, but I think he'll probably agree with me that it didn't really do the business. I mean, he was at Colchester, bless him, when they actually got relegated into the non-league, didn't they? That season, he was one of several managers in charge that season. But a great captain. I mean, any captain that lifts the FA Cup and a few years later the UEFA Cup, World Cup captain for England as well, record number of appearances for Ipswich. And he did chip in with some goals as well. I think I remember one or two that he chipped in with, very important goals. And he was a man that didn't mind getting up the field, but he was an old style fullback, really, wasn't he? Defence was his number one priority. And for me, once again, a great ambassador for the club. And I really enjoy listening to him on BBC Radio Suffolk. I know some fans wonder if he's going on a bit too long with his tactical analysis, but for me, he's spot on, and he knows the game inside out. Lovely bloke as well.
Fantastic guy, absolute legend. I think he's up there. He's up there as one of the best ever Ipswich Town legends for all he's done on and off the pitch. And I quite like listening to him on the radio. I think he's listen to his analysis. I know some people don't always, but listen to what he's actually saying. He says some good stuff. And of course, the best goal I ever thought he scored, Foz, was at West Brom against West Brom in the Cup semi-final at Highbury. What a big one! Oh,
what a day that was, eh? Were you there as well?
Yeah.
Oh, but for me, that was as good. It might have been slightly better than Wembley.
Yes.
Because we'd been trying for so long to get to Wembley, and that was the moment. Fantastic atmosphere at Highbury, and what a game! It had everything, really, didn't it? As far as Ipswich were concerned.
Absolutely right, brilliant. That's so. Mickey Mills is in. Right, you're going to your centre halves, Foz.
Centre halves. I'm going for another member of the FA Cup winning side, and a man who I thought was remarkable in the centre of defence, Alan Hunter. Big Al, as we used to call him. Nothing would ruffle his feathers at all, although I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. And I say that as someone that's, seen him plenty of times on the pitch. And I love the way at Leicester in the FA Cup, forget how many replays there were now, that Alan Hunter looked after a very young John Walk on the pitch, and obviously told Alan Clark and also Mick Jones of Leeds, in no uncertain terms, to watch what they were doing, because he had an eye on them. And that for me was the sign of a great centre half, looking after his fellow defenders. And I loved watching him for Northern Ireland as well, because we used to see those home internationals, didn't we, in the 1970s on TV. And it was always great to see Alan Hunter in the same side as George Best.
Yes.
But Big Al, one of the great personalities, he used to appear on the BBC Radio Suffolk Sports Roundtable on a Friday evening, which in those days was done by Ivan Howlett, who was the founding father of BBC Radio Suffolk. He's sadly no longer with us. And once or twice I got to sit in for Ivan when he couldn't make it, and Alan was on the panel, and he was quite quiet on the air. Yeah. But come 7 o'clock, when the red light went off and we were off air, we had some wonderful stories from him. And it was just a pity that he didn't feel able to tell us those stories on air. But once you've told us the stories, I can well understand. Probably be better not aired. Some fantastic stuff from Big Al. I still bump into him from time to time in town. He's still a big character. And for me, the centre half that during my time of watching Ipswich Town, and my word, we've had some good ones. That is for sure. We've had some great ones.
I mean, that's always been actually this part of the team we're picking has always been the hardest for the people I've had up to now with centre halves, because we've had so many great ones, as you say. But Alan Hunter, you're absolutely right. When he joined Ipswich, of course, he was a big signing for Bobby Robson. Made a huge difference when he came, and it was his presence, wasn't it? His presence was wonderful. So yeah. Good choice, Foz. Good choice.
Yeah, and do you remember his own goal against Liverpool at home? That was quite a remarkable own goal.
I don't.
Oh, he lobbed the goalkeeper from the edge of the pitch. He was under pressure from Kenny Dalglish, and that you happily pass the ball back to the goalkeeper. A lot of our younger viewers and listeners probably won't remember those days, but yeah, you could pass the ball back and the goalkeeper could pick it up. But yeah, basically it went a bit too high over Paul Cooper and ended up in the back of the net. Right. Poor old Big Al. I did feel for him that day, but I'm sure he's had a laugh about it ever since.
So who are you placing alongside Big Al on your team then, Foz?
Well, another big character. Obviously, Big Al and Kevin Beattie were a great partnership. So too were Russell Osman and Terry Butcher, because Beattie and Hunter were an impossible act to follow, I would have thought. But no, obviously Terry Butcher and Russell Osman, they took on the mantle and did it very well indeed. And once again, a great partnership. I could have gone for either of them, actually. Russell Osman, I remember a game against Spurs when he landed a punch on Graham Roberts behind the referee's back at the Churchman's End. And I thought it was Terry Butcher, but it emerged earlier or later that it was Russell Osman. That was a great moment. And Terry Butcher, well, I think everything's been said about Terry that, needs to be said, but obvious memories for me of the big man, kicking down the dressing room door at Norwich City after we were knocked out of the League Cup at the semi-final stage at Carrow Road. All that blood pouring from him in those very famous pictures playing for England. And a man who obviously won the UEFA Cup with Ipswich, but was there for a few more years and sadly was in the side that was relegated, I seem to remember. Yeah. And then obviously he had to move on and went up to Rangers, where he became a huge hero against all odds, really, because an Englishman at Rangers, but they were a few, weren't they, at the time? Yeah. Did really well, and what a fantastic player for England. He loved his heavy metal too. He joined me on the Headbangers Ball on Radio Orwell, and it was great fun, and insisted that he bought me a beer afterwards in the Great White Horse Hotel. So we supped a few ales and talked mainly about music, actually, but it was great to be in the pub there with one of my big town heroes and a man I still bump into today, as I'm sure you do, Mike. He's a fantastic character, and well done, Terry, for all you've done for Ipswich and continue to do, because he is once again a great ambassador, no doubt.
He's actually talking about Russell and Terry, myself and Stuart Watson and Brad Jones, actually, who's the editor, played golf with them only a couple of weeks ago. And fantastic afternoon we had with Terry and Russell at Woodbridge Golf Club. They opened their new 9-hole course. And God, Russell hits the ball a mile. He plays off about 3. Fantastic. I don't think Butcher's quite so prolific, but he's still a good player. But it's lovely to see them. They're in good form, and Butcher's in your team then.
Butcher's my team purely. My favourite players are often the ones with the biggest personalities, not necessarily the best footballers. Yeah. So that's why I've really gone for Terry Butcher. Although of course he was a world class footballer, it goes without saying. Yeah. Many people thought Russell Osman was as good, and they've got a point. And the same with Kevin Beattie and Alan Hunter, but I really couldn't go with Hunter and Beattie. And then not pick one of Butcher and Osman. So that's really why I've gone for Terry Butcher. And
on your final defender then, Foz?
Final defender, the Argentine Mauricio Tarrico. He was fantastic at left back. He was never afraid to get forward, and he got stuck in as well, didn't he? He'd wind players up. He loved playing against Sheffield United, weighed in with loads of great goals and played to the Portman Road crowd. He was one of those players that the fans took to, not straight away, of course, because he was a make weight, wasn't he, in a deal to bring another player in, Adrian Paz, who wasn't such a big success, sadly. But Mauricio Taricco came over with him and played quite a bit of reserve team football at first. And I didn't really think we were going to see him in the first team. Broke through for some reason and held his place, I think, from then on, and was such a positive left back as well. He was the new style wing back, really, wasn't he, Mauricio Taricco? But could be a dirty little dap as well. And I quite like that in my fullbacks. Get stuck in, make sure the winger knows you're there. And he certainly did.
It was quite bizarre, wasn't it? Because when they both signed Paz and Taricco sort of sat there in the corner like he sort of comes his button boy sort of thing, just to carry Paz's suitcases, because everyone was Paz this and Paz that. And poor Adrian Paz didn't last that long, and Taricco became an absolute and he was so he had this Argentinian. He was Argentinian, he's Argentinian, Uruguay. I can't remember what he's Argentinian. Oh, he's Argentinian. But he was so passionate, and his passion, with his South American passion, showed on the pitch, and the fans loved it, and he became, really he did brilliantly well, because no one really knew much about him, and by the end of it he was supporters player of the year, and he scored a great goal against Norwich. He scored a wonderful goal against Norwich, wheeling off a great celebration with his arms spread. Of course, you score against Norwich, you're a hero forever, and good choice.
I was very sorry to see him go, obviously, but I was very pleased that he landed a big deal with Tottenham, and he looked a good player for Tottenham as well, I thought. Then he got a move to West Ham, suffered a really bad injury, and tore up the contract, which I don't think too many players would have done. And that speaks volumes of Mauricio Taricco, a real gentleman as well. But on the pitch, you couldn't take your eyes off him, buzzing around on the left-hand side, cutting in when he could, scoring a few goals too. Yeah, what more do you want from a left-back, really?
Perfect. So your goalkeeper and your back four are, Foz? Let's just go through them again.
In goal, Craig Forrest, and the back four, Mick Mills, Mauricio Taricco, Alan Hunter, and Terry Butcher.
Brilliant. Right, so there we go. So we move it to midfield. You say you've just got a couple of midfielders. You're going for all-out attack in the Stephen Foster Foz favourite Ipswich Town 11. I hope you enjoy listening to this here on the Kings of Anglia podcast, and with myself, Mike Bacon, and Stephen Foster. And we're now going into the midfield then, Foz. You've got a couple in there now. Go on then, tell us how this pans out.
I've put a modern day player in the team, because for me this guy has made all the difference at Ipswich in recent times. A really tough midfield player who I most certainly would not have wanted to play against when I used to play football, not professionally, I hasten to add. But Sam Morsey is the man I've gone for. He has made such a big difference to the town team. He'll always pick up loads of yellow cards. But my word, he gets stuck in, and he's now showing signs, I think, under Kieran McKenna, of being a far more attacking option for the midfield as well. And I think if we can get another tough tackling midfield player alongside Sam Morsey in the side this coming season, I think we're going to be very difficult to beat. I really do, and it'll give Morsey a lot of freedom to get further up the pitch. And we've got to put up with the yellow cards, and there may be one or two red ones to come next season as well. But with Sam Morsey at the helm, you're in with a shout, and I think he's made the world of difference. He's the sort of midfield player that I think we've been missing for many, many years. In fact, when I think about it, I can't think of the last tough tackling midfield player we've had in that vein for quite some time. I loved Jim Magilton. He was a great footballer, wasn't he? Great passer of the ball. Wouldn't say he was particularly a tough tackler. You might be able to help me out, Mike, with someone that is in the Sam Morsey mould, but we haven't had too many of those down the years, and I think it's told. It really has.
No, I think you're right. Foss. You have to go back. Yeah, you do have to go back quite some way, probably, to find someone who really gets stuck in like Sam does. And I think it's his influence on the pitch that has proved so key, particularly the last 3 or 4 months of this season. If you watch him on the pitch, he's quite happy to dish out bollockings to other town players. Basically, if they haven't done the business, I saw him. I can't remember, Plymouth, I think Luke Wolfenden got a right earful from Morsey. He's taken on the captain. He's taken on the captain's armband. And with that attitude, I think he's been good for Kieran McKenna. I think McKenna's leaning on him a little bit.
It really is a case of, with Sam Morsy in the side, you're giving the opposition a lot to think about. And there'll be a lot of opponents who, quite frankly, won't fancy playing against Sam Morsy. And we've needed players like that in the past. We've been a bit of a soft touch in midfield for too long, but we're not anymore.
Brilliant. Alongside Sam then, Foz?
Alongside Sam, well, I could have gone for Arnold Muren, but I've gone for Franz Tyson because obviously with Sam Morsy playing a more defensive role, it would free up Franz Tyson to provide some of the creative elements of all the tricks that he came up with. I remember a game against Crystal Palace at Portman Road when Jerry Francis was England captain at the time, and Franz Tyson made him look an absolute idiot on the pitch. He really enjoyed playing against Jerry Francis, and the gulf in quality between the then England captain and I think Franz was the Dutch international by then, but certainly a star for us, was enormous, absolutely enormous. And Tyson would run rings around most players on the pitch, had a lovely eye for a pass, and alongside John Walk, obviously, and Arnold Muren was the dream midfield. They between them they had it all. And I know people wax lyrical still about the UEFA Cup winning side and that Town team under Robson, but really, when you think back, I mean, it was the dream team. It was perfect. It really was. The only thing that wasn't perfect was that we hadn't got enough players in the squad. So when we picked up the injuries, as you normally do in the season, as you always do, hadn't really got the quality players to come in. So we wouldn't notice a difference. And sadly, we fell short on a number of occasions as far as the championship was concerned. But yeah, Franz Tyson for me, one of the greatest midfield players the club has ever seen, and certainly one of my favourites.
Yeah, winning the championship, of course, was always Bobby's biggest regret that season for all of us, really. We was, because at the end of the day, it's great winning the FA Cup and you can win the Carabao Cup and stuff like that. Champions League's a bit different these days, but winning the title is everything. And Ipswich were clearly one of the best sides, if not the best side that season. So I know we're going back a bit in time there, but you mentioned Tyson. But yeah, losing, not being able to win the title, I think was always Bobby's biggest. So sad because that we so deserved that to win that year. And I think even Mick Mills sort of harked on about that season, although they won the UEFA Cup. It was still a sad season for not winning the league that year. I remember doing a piece with him where he actually said that. I thought what he's going to say when he said this, but I still can't get over that season, 81, that we didn't win the league. I'm great we won the UEFA Cup. I've never got over not winning the league. Which is,
no.
But I do, Foz, I do like your midfield of Morsy and Tyson. That's cute. That is. I like that. I mean, that's modern with a sort of a legend of the past. But I'll tell you what, Morsy loved playing alongside Tyson, and probably vice versa.
Yeah. They would be a great partnership, wouldn't they? And and good luck to Morsy and the rest of the team for the coming season, because as I say, I've got high hopes. And I thought, I'd put a modern day player in. And he is a great player, I think. And hopefully, at the time of our conversation, there has been a bit of speculation about whether he will move on. But, I don't think he will, because Sam is the man. I've no doubt about that.
Brilliant. Put Sam as the man. Quite right, Foz. Very good. We like that. Excellent. So there you go. There's two midfielders. So now we're going for sort of a four-pronged attack. Foz is not messing around here. We're going for goals.
Yes, we are, and I love my wingers. I used to play fullback for the school and for various local teams, and I love getting stuck in against a fast-raiding winger. And I always think teams with a bit of width are always in with a better chance, because you can get behind defences, hopefully, and whip in crosses. And my first of the two wingers in the side is Jimmy Robertson, who was a very early signing for Bobby Robson and helped save the club from relegation when he arrived, alongside a veteran centre forward by the name of Frank Clark.
Yes.
Not to be confused with the other Frank Clark, who played and managed with Nottingham Forest. But Jimmy Robertson had quite a pedigree when he came to Ipswich. He'd won the FA Cup with Tottenham, I seem to recall, in the 60s. And he was an Arsenal player, so played for both the North London clubs. Don't know how that all went down. But came to Portman Road at a time when we badly needed not only goals, but results. And he, for me, was a key part of Town staying in the top flight so early on under Sir Bobby Robson, as he became. And Jimmy Robertson and Frank Clark were a great partnership. And I remember standing by then, I'd sort of forgotten the chicken run side of the pitch, because quite frankly, I couldn't get close enough to the players because I was a young man. I wanted to see the players. I wanted to get the autographs. So I persuaded my dad to come over to the West Stand, just where the players come out. And I've got a picture here. I'm not sure. Don't worry. I haven't got too many props, Mike, but I've got a picture here of, I don't know whether you can see this very clearly. You probably can. It's a colorized version of the 62 team coming out of the dressing room there. And there are two policemen. And my dad is one of those two policemen. He used to be on patrol at Portman Road in those days. And it's, lovely to think that years later, we both stood probably just over the wall where he was standing there to watch the games. It was not a great place to watch the game, to be honest, but you got to see all the players come out. And obviously when the game was underway, you got very close to players taking corners and throw-ins. And I'll never forget the smell of the liniment on Jimmy Robertson's legs. He was one of these players that covered his legs in liniment, and you could smell it on the terraces. And he used to whip in the ball superbly. Great right foot player. And he was an exciting player even then. He probably wasn't at his very best for Ipswich. He'd done the business for Spurs and the Gunners, but he still played a huge part for a couple of years or so at Portman Road. And it was great seeing the players close up, and the managers as well. Used to love seeing all the managers walk past. None of them would stop for an autograph, but that didn't matter.
Well, I love the smell of the liniment on Jimmy Robertson's legs. What a sort of like smell-o-vision. It's what a wonderful sort of thought that process that brings to us. But wonderful, Foz. What a great memory. That's why you see, this is why it's a favourite 11. It doesn't have to be your best 11. It's all about great memories of players. And Jimmy Robertson, very old school. Many people listening and watching this will never heard of him, but hopefully we've found a picture of him to stick up on the video here, so you could see him. And on audio, go and Google Jimmy Robertson Ipswich Town. You'll see him. He looked a real traditional old player. But so you've got one winger then, Foz. Who's the other one?
Well, the other one has to be Clive Woods. Really,
yes.
Clive Woods for a number of reasons. A member of the FA Cup winning sides, and there was that lovely banner, wasn't there, at Wembley, to do with Pat Rice. I forget what it said now, having just mentioned it, but there was a great banner mentioning, Woods eating Pat Rice or something like that. And he played a big part at Wembley, of course, gave the team a lot of width. Prior to that, in '75, he'd scored that wonderful goal at Filbert Street in one of those replays, the last replay, obviously, against Leeds in the FA Cup. The season, Mike, we thought that Town were going to win the FA Cup, but Clive Thomas had other ideas, didn't he?
We have to move on, Foz, we have to move on from Clive Thomas. We've got to forget him. We've got to forget him. I remember that Clive Woods goal, though. What a curler in the top corner. I remember listening. I wasn't there that night because I was a bit young, a little bit younger than you, so I wasn't allowed out that time of night in a midweek. But I listened to it on the radio. I remember being on sports report, sports night on the radio, and they described Woods. He's cut in from the inside. He's curled this ball in, and it's there. And it was 3-2, I think, and that's like the fourth replay, wasn't it, or fourth replay, I think. Wonderful.
Yeah, and there hadn't been any goals, had there, prior to in all the other games. Suddenly we had a goal fest. And Clive Woods, superb, one of the best goals ever scored by a Town player. And I was at Filbert Street that night. I didn't go to the other replays, actually. That was the first replay I went to, and I'm glad I was there, because it was also the day, Mike, and I've got to get a mention in for my favourite band, Dr. Feelgood, that I first heard Dr. Feelgood on the radio. We were driving to Filbert Street in the afternoon. In those days, it took hours to get to Leicester, didn't it? The roads were so bad. And, there wasn't a huge amount of traffic about, but it was just that the roads were, single carriageway, dual carriageway, if you were lucky. Anyway, we listened to John Peel on the radio on the way up, and he was playing a session from Dr. Feelgood. So that was the first time I heard the Feelgoods. Went to the game, fantastic 3-2 win with Clive Woods getting the winner. And Clive was a very important figure, for the team leading up and indeed at the FA Cup final. But after that, and I'm sure you'll agree, Mike, Bobby Robson knew that team had done all it was going to do for him, and he had to rebuild.
Yeah.
And it didn't take him long to rebuild. And sadly for Clive Woods, he fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
One of many players actually that moved on. And if I remember rightly, he moved up to Norwich, didn't he?
He did, and I'll tell you a little story because I was playing a few years after that. Yes, he did go to Norwich, and I was playing for a football team called BS Fonrove in Ipswich in a pre-season friendly many years later, and we played Attleborough in a pre-season, and there was Clive Woods playing centre half for Attleborough. He must have been He must have been, he must centre half. He had so much knowledge on him. He was about 40. I think he's in his 40s, but he's grey, wispy hair. And it was unbelievable. I was thrilled to sort of suddenly be on the same pitch as him. And he'd obviously lost his pace, but he knew how to he still run the game from centre half. But Woodsy was a wonderful player.
Yeah, he was tremendous and an important figure in the 1970s. Not only the FA Cup winning side, but before that, Town were a very attractive side to watch, thanks to players like Clive Woods, who could whip in some lovely crosses. And once again, I love wingers that can actually hug the touchline and actually do something with the ball when they get it. We have had players in the team in the past who have managed to hug the touchline but haven't really made an impact from there. But Woods, for me, was one of those players that stretched a defence, same as Jimmy Robertson on the other side. And once you stretch a defence, anything can happen once that ball gets put into the mixer, as they say.
Put into the mixer. Very good footballing term, Foz. Very good. Yeah. You're bringing them all out this afternoon. This morning. It's fantastic.
Hey, yeah.
But just one little thing, younger viewers, just Google Clive Woods, Ipswich 3, Leeds 2, Filbert Street, 1975, was it, I believe? Or so, anyway.
Yeah, January. Yeah.
January 75, and just watch Woods' curling winner. Great goal. Anyway, so you got Woods and Robertson supplying the ammunition to who, Foz, in the middle?
In the middle, well, my number 9 goes to Paul Mariner for pretty obvious reasons. It was a toss-up between him and Ray Crawford, but I only saw Ray play for Ipswich a few times, and I did enjoy his 2 goals for Colchester against Leeds in the FA Cup. And I enjoyed talking to him on the pitch at Portman Road only a few weeks ago when he was a guest of the club. And he really is a lovely man. I mean, he's going on forever as Ray Crawford, but I didn't see that much of Ray Crawford in an Ipswich shirt. So I thought I'd go for a man I did see a lot of, Paul Mariner, who for me was the complete centre forward. He really was. And what a character off the pitch. He was another guest of mine on my rock show. I'm on the Headbangers Ball. It was a really cold night. He drove in from, I think he had a place near Hadley, and he drove in treacherous conditions for the programme and was really glad to get back home again, I think, because it was one of those wintry nights. In those days, you weren't really sure which way it was going to go. In those days, we had lots of snow, not just the flurries we tend to get today, but in those days, it was very wintry indeed. Paul Mariner was great form on the programme, picking music by the likes of, Iron Maiden, Saxon, Deep Purple. He was big friends with Ian Gillan.
Yes, he was.
He for me was a complete centre forward, and I've lost count really the number of great goals that I've seen Paul Mariner score. It was great to see him as part of the FA Cup winning side and the UEFA Cup winning side. And once again, he had to move on, really, didn't he? Under circumstances. I mean, I remember him and Walkie came in for a lot of stick for demanding a big wage increase, but they'd done the business for Town. They were big players, and they really did, deserve a bit more money probably, and wanted bigger moves. So Maris went to Arsenal and Walkie to Liverpool. But Paul Mariner, a great broadcaster as well in the end, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Towards the end of his life, he did a lot of work in the States and was a very popular figure over there. And I've got nothing but admiration for him as a footballer and as a person. One of the great personalities.
Great footballer, Paul Mariner. Great person. As you say, that Ipswich Town. If you played for Ipswich Town back in the Robson era, of course, you weren't the best paid footballers in the league by far. I mean, it's extraordinary to think how good a team we were, and yet it wasn't money that was being thrown at the team. It was just the team being a Robson team, which was fantastic. It was all coming through well, it was an academy then, but a youth system. So yeah, great. So Paul Mariner, well, a legend who many people are picking their favourite 11s for. So good shout for that. I think most people will go with Paul Mariner up front. But who's he playing alongside? I mean, this is going to be interesting, or is it? Yeah,
this might surprise a few people, but I like big characters and personalities on the pitch as well as off the pitch, and I've gone for Chef Kikuchi. A big fan's favourite under the Joe Royle era. and Joe Royle did very well with very little money to spend to pull a very exciting team together. A gung-ho style of football, which obviously suited Shefki Kuqi down to the ground. And indeed, on many occasions, he threw himself to the ground, didn't he? The Flying Finn, as he became known. And I used to do some commentary for Ipswich Town at around that time, and was very lucky to be able to not only see these great players of that era, but also interview them afterwards. And Shefki Kuqi, a real gentleman as well, always pleased to talk to you. And I just think him and Darren Bent, I nearly put Darren Bent in the side as well because of the impact that those two players had together under Joe Royle. But I thought, well, Shefki Kuqi for me was the bigger personality and could do some pretty unusual things. Sadly, it didn't really work for him after he left Portman Road, and he had his moments, of course, and came back on loan, I seem to remember, and then picked up a bad injury. And he was back, as I say, he was back, I think, during the season, because I interviewed him half time, and I know that he's keen to get into management, but that might be easier said than done. It's not a job that you can get easily these days, is it really? You've got to do all your coaching badges and all sorts of stuff, as Kieran McKenna has proved.
I mean, the great thing about Shefki, Foz, wasn't it, that you just proved that if you've just got a heart of a lion, and you work your socks, you can make yourself, because he wasn't technically particularly great, but it didn't matter. He worked so hard, and he was a big lad, wasn't he? I mean, he was lucky he was quite a big lad, so he could put himself about.
He must have been intimidating to play against.
Yeah.
And as you say, he was chasing all around the pitch. He did all his work in the last third, really. Yeah. You wouldn't want him in your own penalty area, putting last gasp tackles in and things like that. I mean, I'm sure he would have done some defensive duties under Joe Royle, but I only remember Shefki Kuqi as an out-and-out attacking player who, turned defences, made a lot of room for Darren Bent to exploit, and also those midfielders coming through. I mean, Tommy Miller scored a hat full of goals, didn't he? He was another one that I could well have put in, because for a few years, he was a great midfield player for Ipswich and scored loads of goals. And Ian Westlake as well, remember him? He chipped in with several goals. It was a gung-ho approach by Joe Royle, which nearly, succeeded, didn't it? Nearly.
I mean, it's funny. Andy Warren put Tommy Miller in his favourite 11. He said what a great player was, and you're right. You're going on to say that Joe nearly got us back in the press. See, I always thought that's the slight difference between John Lyall and Joe Royle is that John Lyall did it, Joe Royle didn't quite. But they were two very similar managers, not in their styles of play, but in the way I think we've had, because we always talk about Bobby Robson and George Burley and Alf Ramsey. Those two guys weren't here as long, but they still had a huge impact, and they both nearly. I mean, John Lyall did, because John Lyall got us back into the Premier League. Joe didn't quite, did he? But he was so close.
He didn't. But Joe Royle had next to no money to spend, and brought in Darren Curry, who had no pace whatsoever. But my word, what a fine striker of the ball he was, and he created lots of goals for Ipswich. But we hadn't quite got enough money. We had got nowhere near enough money to buy ourselves, if you like, into the Premier League. And West Ham beat us in both playoff semi-finals. I was at one of them at West Ham, and the atmosphere at the old Upton Park was unbelievable. And it'd be great to get that atmosphere again at Portman Road, as we did at times last season. I think if we start off well this coming season, hopefully, there'll be really, really big crowds. I'm talking near capacity crowds, with the atmosphere to match as well, and get behind the lads, because I think this could be our year.
Just a quick word about that, Foz, before we go on to we'll go through your team again, name your subs and your manager. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I've, like yourself, been following Ipswich Town for years. I mean, the Ipswich Town fans are absolutely outstanding. I mean, their loyalty to the club, their passion for the club. And this season, we have really seen that ramp up. Last season, we've really seen that ramp up. Listen, we're in League One, for God's sake. 23, 25, 26,000. It's extraordinary. And I watched Forest go up, recently. And Ipswich and Forest have got so much history side by side. I'm just thinking that's going to be us in a couple of years' time. That's going to be us. Sunderland have now got out of here. They're on their way up, hopefully. Forest are now up. You're right. Could this now be our turning point?
I think it could. And no disrespect to Nottingham Forest, but I didn't think they were great last season when I watched them. I mean, they got the results. Of course they did. I mean, the big test will be next season for them. Cool. Huddersfield, I didn't think they were any great shakes either, to be honest with you. So the Championship, yeah, people say it's difficult to get out of it. It's difficult to get out of League One. We know that, but I don't think we've got anything to be afraid of when we get promotion next season in the Championship the following season. I think if you're playing a really crisp passing game as we are, with some really good strikers and some tough tackling midfielders, I think we could take League One by storm next season. But we've got to score more goals. There's no doubt about that, and we really have. And I'm very pleased to see that we have made a new signing, the guy from Rotherham, who obviously has got a great pedigree. I know that doesn't always mean they're going to do it for Ipswich. I mean, we know that better than most clubs. But yeah, let's hope this year is our year, and we've got 2 or 3 new strikers on the books who are really going to do the business.
Freddie Ladapo's come over from Rotherham, of course. I mean, look forward to.
I was after, yeah.
That's right, Freddie. You'll be at fast Freddie Ladapo. Well, fast Freddie, you can call him over the PA when he's banged in a goal and run towards.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I'm passing you a few little lines there, Foz. I'm sure you need them. Anyway, so Foz, go through your team then, and then name us also your 4, 5, or 10 subs. How many you've got?
10 subs, right? Okay. Well, I'll have to do the subs off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Don't worry.
That I've mentioned but didn't quite get in the team. But the team is in goal, Craig Forrest, a back 4 of Mick Mills, Mauricio Tarico, Terry Butcher, and also Alan Hunter. In midfield, I've got them working hard, these two, because they're the only 2 in midfield, Sam Morsey and also Franz Tyson. And up front, we have 4 very busy players, Jimmy Robertson, Paul Mariner, Shef Kikuchi, and Clive Woods. I suppose the obvious manager would be Bobby Robson, but I'm going to be less predictable than that and go for John Lyle. Because as you quite rightly said, John Lyle did the business. His first season, he wasn't pulling up any trees, and I was a bit worried, to be honest with you. The second season, he came up with a way of playing that the other teams in the old second division just couldn't cope with, and we would grind out results as well. So John Lyle would certainly be my manager, because he is my favourite town manager of all of them, and no disrespect to any of the others I've got to know reasonably well down the years, some better than others. Substitute wise, well, I suppose my substitute goalkeeper would probably be Richard Wright. Defensively, probably who should I go for? I'll go for Kevin Beattie. He was a good friend of mine, and I'm sorry he wasn't in the first 11 really, but something had to give. So yeah, Kevin Beattie certainly. I mean, fullback wise, always good to have a fullback on the bench. I would certainly go for probably George Burley, a model professional, great club stalwart for obvious reasons. Who should we have on the bench as far as the midfielders are concerned? Well, I suppose Arnold Muren and John Walk. And then up front, Ray Crawford. And I think I'll leave it at that. I really do. I've probably got enough strikers actually on the starting 11, to be honest.
Well, I think, Foz, you've got the strongest bench we've had so far. There's no doubt about that. Muren, Walk, Crawford, Burley, and whatever else. But, I mean, that's what this is all about. It's about a Fab 11, and your Fab 11 is a Super 11. It's great. That's a great little stories there, Fab. I mean, it's really... I mean, that's what this feature is all about. It's about having some fun and looking back over our favourite players, and great memories there, Foz. And yeah, that's great.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much indeed for asking.
Well, thank you, Foz, for being. I mean, I'd like to say, you're at Portman Road again next season. We'll hear you again, bashing out the tunes.
Well, yeah, I haven't heard otherwise, but I'm really, looking forward to getting back behind the microphone there, and looking forward to 30,000 people in the ground being able to hear me.
And finally, you're confident we're going up, aren't you, Foz?
I am, because I've got a lot of time for Kieran McKenna. I've met him a couple of times now. Very impressed with him. And I think he's got all the knowledge. He's got the contacts in the game, and he wants to play the game the way I personally like to see it. On the deck, crisp passing. He does need to. He knows this. He doesn't need me to tell him anything. But the striking problem needs solving, and I think he does need 1 or 2 extra midfield players. Some tough tackling midfield players to complement the more creative players we have in the side. So we're nearly there, but not quite. But I'm sure the new signing will most certainly help. That's a big signal to the rest of the division that we certainly mean business. And up the town, as they say.
Up the town. Thanks, Foz. It's great to hear from you and great to see you if you're watching this of it. I hope you enjoyed this, My Favourite Town 11 with Stephen Foz Foster. Follow us all on the Kings of Anglia podcast. We'll do more of these throughout the summer, as well as, of course, our main podcast with all the boys from the East Anglia Daytime Sports Department. I hope you like what we're doing with the KOA pod. Foz, once again, thank you very much, and we look forward to speaking to someone else later. But Foz, thank you.
Cheers.